Throughout my childhood, my mother and grandmother made many trips to go see hoodoo doctors. And in those days, people would travel near and far to see the old time hoodoo doctors or what kind of remained of them because they were slowly dying out even at that time. When someone heard of a really good one, people would all gather and hurry to go see them. And my mother and grandma was right there with them. So my mother would pack all of us children into the back seat of the car. Her and grandma would get in the front. And back then, there was no seat belts. There wasn't even car insurance. You didn't have to have it. So the cars were huge, big iron tank like cars, and we would all cram in the back however we could. And up the highway we'd go, just a flying. And this time, we were headed to see an old hoodoo doctor in the mountains of Tennessee. Now, I don't know exactly where it was or who this particular hoodoo doctor was, their name, because I was too young. But it seemed like we drove from hours from Alabama to Tennessee up in those mountains. My grandmother and my mother would go to when we got there, they would go to the old shack and they would sit with the hoodoo doctor while us kids, we stayed in the car. Back then, there wasn't no laws against kids sitting in cars unattended like it is now. My mother and grandma would leave that old shack looking like they had met a celebrity or something. They had sat there and talked with the hoodoo doctor. Sometimes those hoodoo doctors would do spells for you, and sometimes they would tell you what you can do, but they would always do readings. So, whatever he told my mom and grandma, they were very pleased with it. So they would talk about their visit on the way home. Now, I could be wrong, but I believe it was this particular hoodoo doctor who told my mother that my father had a spell cast on him that created a knot in his stomach, and there wasn't nothing that no one would be able to do about it. Sure enough, a couple of years later, my father died with a knot in his stomach the size of a fist. And he suffered greatly before he passed. By the time he went to the doctor and they attempted to do surgery, it was too late. But my father enjoyed a great life. He did all the things that he wanted to do. The family was happy to see him at rest instead of the agonizing pain that he had went through before he passed away. But back then I used to wonder, why didn't my mother and grandma go to some of our own family members or the local hoodoo doctors in our community? I mean, there wasn't a lot of them, but they were all active at that time. So as I got older and I learned more about the history of hoodoo in our area, I began to understand why. The hoodoo back then is nothing like the hoodoo that we have today. Back then, people were more brutal, cutthroat. They had way more power than we do today. You took a risk going to some of them, even our own family members who practiced, because if they had a grudge against you or was close with someone who didn't like you, they would put something on you. All along you thinking that they're working for you when they're really working against you. Small communities like ours, this is often what would happen. So, a lot of people actually learned to do hoodoo so that they could protect themselves, so that they could keep things off of them. That's how rampant it was during that time. But it's interesting that during the mid 1970s, I watched as the hoodoo doctors were outmaneuvered by prophets and evangelists. Now, prophets and evangelists have always been a center and focal point of the African American community. But in the mid 1970s, you had a whole new breed of them that was coming out. People started putting their hands on the TV with the evangelist Ernest Anglers. They started rubbing themselves with prayer cloths and wearing holy necklaces to break poverty that was provided by the likes of Reverend Ike. In my community, the hoodoo doctors became dutiful church mothers and they become the elders in the church. And hoodoo just quietly shrunk into the shadows as people seemed to become holier than thou. Anyway, I could go on and on, but I was just thinking about this the other day and I wanted to share it with you just to give you a glimpse of some of the old style hoodoo back in the day. So I want to thank you for watching this video. Please consider supporting my work by visiting my website. I do have the 2024 Hoodoo Almanac and Soulful Divination book available. I also do spiritual consultations. Just visit my shop page. My website is in the video's description. Thank you. I love you and wish nothing but the best for you. See you in the next video.